When we talk about food and survival in America, we often think of it as a fundamental right, something so basic it should never be questioned. Yet, time and again, the very programs designed to protect people from hunger are reshaped, restricted, and made more difficult to access. And now, in 2025, we are staring at one of the biggest shifts in SNAP policy in recent memory, a new work rule that increases the monthly requirement from 54 hours to 80. That number might look like just a few thousand extra hours on paper, but the reality behind it is enormous. For seniors, struggling families, and individuals barely hanging on, this change is not a footnote in policy, it is a tidal wave that will hit the most vulnerable first. Let's pause and think about what 80 hours a month really means. That is 20 hours every single week. For someone in their 20s with a flexible schedule, it might sound manageable, but for a 62-year-old with chronic pain or a grandmother raising grandchildren while trying to make ends meet, those hours are a mountain. The government frames it as a simple adjustment, a way to encourage work, to instill responsibility. But the truth is that this rule risks cutting off benefits for people who are already getting all they can. SNAP has always walked a tightrope between being a lifeline and being a system of control. It was created to fight hunger, but over the years, restrictions and rules have been layered onto it like chains. Able-bodied adults without dependents with the program cause a bodge have long been required to meet work conditions to continue receiving aid. But now the definition of who falls into the category has expanded. It's no longer just young, single people. The net has widened, capturing older adults who may be caring for family members, struggling with health conditions, or transitioning out of the workforce. Suddenly, people in their late 50s and early 60s, individuals who should be preparing for retirement, are being told to prove themselves by clocking 80 hours a month, or risk losing access to food. Supporters of this policy argue that it encourages independence, that it prevents people from becoming too dependent on government aid. But let's be real about what we are talking about. We are not talking about luxury. We are talking about the money that allows a person to buy rice, milk, and vegetables. We are talking about the fragile support system that keeps seniors from lining up at food pantries every single week. To suggest that tightening the rules will somehow inspire a new era of self-sufficiency ignores the reality that millions of people work hard already, but in jobs that are unstable, low-paying, and unreliable. 80 hours a month doesn't guarantee security, it guarantees pressure. And what about the seniors who are working in traditional jobs? Many of them are caregivers. They look after disabled spouses, sick relatives, or even their grandchildren. Their labor doesn't come with a paycheck, but it is work in every sense of the word. Yet under these new rules, that work doesn't count. The system doesn't recognize the invisible labor that holds families together. The new requirement insists on documented hours, approved roles, boxes that can be checked by bureaucrats. It punishes the kind of unpaid caregiving that society quietly relies on every single day. Consider the ripple effect of this change. Imagine an older man, 61 years old, living in a rural area. He can barely find steady work because jobs are scarce, transportation is limited, and his health slows him down. Under the 54-hour requirement, he barely managed to stay compliant. He took odd jobs. He volunteered where he could. But now, with the bar raised to 80 hours, he falls short. He doesn't meet the threshold, and as a result, his benefits are cut off. This isn't theoretical. This is what will happen to thousands upon thousands of people who are living on the margins. What makes this even more alarming is the way it reshapes the purpose of SNAP. The program was never meant to be a labor mandate. It was meant to be nutrition assistance, a guarantee that no matter how rough life gets, people can still eat. By tying it more tightly to work, the government sends a message: food is conditional, survival is conditional. And for seniors, this message is devastating. After decades of contribution to society, after paying taxes and working jobs that built this country, they are now being told that even food comes with strings attached. Some will argue that there are exemptions, that seniors technically age out at 65. But here's the problem. So many low-income Americans don't retire at 65. They don't glide into golden years with pensions and savings. They work until their bodies give out. And even then, many are under the age cutoff. At 64, they are still required to meet the 80-hour threshold. They are still lumped into the category of able-bodied, regardless of health, regardless of circumstance. And when benefits are stripped away, the impact is not just on them. It is on the families they support, the children they help feed, the spouses who depend on shared groceries. This is not just about numbers. This is about psychology. What does it feel like to be told that the groceries you rely on will vanish if you cannot meet a quota? It creates fear. It creates stress. And stress has a way of bleeding into every corner of life. Seniors begin to worry constantly. What if they can't find volunteer hours this month? What if transportation costs eat up their small income before they can even get to a place to work? What if illness keeps them in bed for a week and suddenly they don't hit the 80-hour mark? This rule doesn't just tighten the system, it weaponizes uncertainty. It creates a climate where people live in dread of losing the one consistent piece of support they have. Let's also talk about the myth that jobs are always available. In many parts of the country, particularly rural areas, steady work is scarce. Employers are cutting hours, automating tasks, or offering only seasonal positions. Expecting people to hit an 80-hour monthly requirement assumes the jobs exist, that transportation is available, that health is steady, and that the person has the time. But for seniors juggling medical appointments, family obligations, and the natural limitations of aging, those assumptions are cruelly unrealistic. This rule does not reflect reality, it reflects ideology. The consequences of failing to meet the requirement are harsh. Miss the threshold, and benefits can be suspended for months. In some cases, individuals are locked out for even longer, forced to reapply and start the process again. Imagine losing food assistance over a technicality, a missed report, or a shortage of hours. It doesn't just cut food, it cuts dignity. It sends a message that unless you meet the state's definition of productivity, you are undeserving of basic nutrition. That message is corrosive, especially for seniors who have given their entire lives to work already. And let's not forget how quickly these policies spread. Once an 80-hour requirement becomes the standard, what stops policymakers from pushing it even further? Today it's 80 hours. Tomorrow it could be 100. The threshold is moving, and every step forward means another layer of hardship for those who can least afford it. But here's the hidden truth. Hunger does not motivate people to work more. It debilitates. It weakens the body, fogs the mind, and makes it harder to concentrate, to show up, to persevere. By increasing the work rule, the government isn't empowering people, it's trapping them in a cycle where the very thing meant to support them becomes a tool of punishment. Seniors, in particular, will feel this the hardest, because when you are 60, when your back aches and your energy is not what it used to be, 80 hours is not just a number, it is a threat. The SNAP work rule change is being sold as accountability, but what it truly is abandonment. It is a way of shifting responsibility off the government and onto individuals who already bear too much. It is saying, we owe you nothing unless you prove yourself. And that message, directed at older adults and struggling families, is devastating. The reality is simple. Food is not a privilege, it is a right. And seniors who have contributed to society, who have raised children, worked jobs, paid taxes, and carried burdens, should not be forced to jump through hoops just to eat. This rule is not about responsibility, it is about control. It narrows access, it instills fear, and it strips away dignity at the exact stage of life when people should be cared for most. If you are a senior, or you love someone who is, this change should matter deeply to you. It should matter because it sets a precedent that food is conditional. It should matter because it erodes the foundation of security in old age. And it should matter because no one should have to prove their worth to eat. The shift from 54 hours to 80 is not just a policy tweak. It is a warning sign of where our priorities are headed. And here's the call to action. Don't accept it silently. Speak up. Share your story. Call your representatives. Let them know what 80 hours looks like in real life, not on paper, because policies are written by people, and people can be persuaded, but only if those most affected raise their voices and refuse to be invisible. The new SNAP work rule is more than a number. It is a statement about who deserves food and who does not. And unless we challenge it, unless we fight for a system that honors dignity over quotas, millions will find themselves punished simply for being too old, too tired, or too invisible to meet the demands of a system that has lost touch with reality.